This week on Quality Digest Live, we explore the things you need to know to implement risk-based thinking.
That's right. Plus, can driverless cars understand the human rules of the road? Well, we'll find out when we come back.
And welcome back, one and all, to Quality Digest Live for January 12th, 2018. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief, Dirk Ducharme. According to an article in Wired, about 1.8 million new tech jobs, 1.8 million new tech jobs will be created between 2014 and 2024. Many of them requiring people with data and computer science credentials. However, here's a problem. Colleges and universities are only turning out about 28,000 computer science graduates with bachelor's and master's degree per year. Now, all of this is according to the article Impatient with Colleges, Employers Design Their Own Courses by John Marcus in Wired magazine. So, as the title implies, to address this issue, basically the gap issue, companies like Microsoft have designed their own courseware and are offering it through online courseware companies like edX. edX is one, there's many, these are basically companies that specialize in delivering technical courseware over the internet. So you're thinking, well, ho-hum, there's nothing really new about this, right? But the twist on this one is that some universities are now employing this third-party courseware into their own curriculum. According to Wired, that's what Eastern Washington University did. It's using edX, the third-party online courseware provider, to provide courses in data analytics and related topics developed by Microsoft and other employers and academics. But here's the key bit here, and here's the important twist. They're adding extra support from faculty in classrooms in what's known as blended learning. So the idea here is you aren't just telling a student, university isn't just telling a student, go take this online course, come back when you're done. They're actually integrating teaching in with it, human teaching in with it. Now, Lee Rubenstein, Vice President of Business Development at edX, points out, as we have many times on this show, that the challenging thing for colleges is that the technology changes so quickly that by the time you get your program, the time the university gets its program up and running, there's already been a lot of change. You have to make a lot of changes and updates just to keep it relevant, and typical university just can't do it that fast. By comparison, he says, edX and similar companies update their tech courses as many as 4 or 5 times a year. Now, not everybody is on board with universities using third-party courseware. There has been some pushback by professors who argue that this cookie-cutter approach actually turns out poorly trained data scientists. And what they're talking about is without the facilitation of trained educators, they're just getting the data spewed at them, and even if the data is good, they may not learn it because they're not being, quote, taught it. They're it's up to them to assimilate and figure it out on their own, right? So, there's a certain amount of truth to what they're saying. But I think that this blended approach that Eastern Washington University is doing may actually help mitigate the problem. That is, you're going to have a trained educator combined with the online material. But even if you fully agree that with this idea's critics, which typically tend to be academics and professors, even if you agree with them and believe that all coursework should be produced and taught as it always has been, you are faced with a couple problems. One we already kind of touched on. Universities are like aircraft carriers. They are really slow to turn. They simply cannot create their own fully vetted curriculum as quickly as technology changes. And number two, even if they could, there's another problem. there are not enough faculty to keep up with the demand. U.S. universities produce fewer than 2,000 people with PhDs in computer science in 2015-2016, according to the Computing Research Association. And 2,000 PhDs now a year. Now, keep in mind that to be a professor at the university level, you have to be a PhD. You bachelors don't teach courses, or masters, very rarely even masters, unless they come in as a guest instructor. So there's only 2,000 PhDs cranking out a year, 60% of whom end up in the private sector because there's a lot more money there.
Do the math.
That's
about what?
That leaves
800 people.
That leaves 800 people. To teach the 2 million tech jobs that are coming down the pike. So the math just doesn't line up. So something has to be done, and I like where this idea is going. Maybe taking blended learning with a third-party provider is part of the solution. And I think as long as you involve the professors and the academics in this process, it doesn't hurt their job, because I think that's what they're concerned about, is my job's going to go away. It's going to be computerized, right? I mean, it's all going to be online. Well, no, there is a lot of value to having a PhD trained professor who is going to help deliver or facilitate this material in a blended learning environment. I think there's a lot to be said for that, and I think it's just a matter of integrate these in a way that benefits everybody, benefits industry, who needs the people, benefits the students who want to get this training, and doesn't hurt the professors or the universities in the meantime.
Yeah, so, and professors in the universities have a kind of a dog in the fight.
Well, sure,
so,
they have a dog in the fight.
They're not altogether enthusiastic about it.
Right, exactly.
So consider that too. But I mean, if it works for the users, that's really the key thing here. I think you have to think about it. And it seems like it probably does pretty well.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Dirk. All right, well, in other news, according to the American Society for Quality, these are good times right now for those of us in this little quality industry of ours. 3 in a row, salaries rise again for quality professionals is the name of this article that appeared last month on the ASQ website. And we linked out to the piece in Tuesday's issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. And the headline takeaway here is that for the 3rd consecutive year, as indicated in the title of the piece, average salaries grew for quality professionals in the United States. In 2017, the increase was 1.5%. Bringing the average salary to a cool $93,036 a year.
Wow.
Which leaves me asking all of you a question.
What am I doing here? That's more than we both make.
I was going to say, brother, can you spare a couple of $1,000? But Dirk felt like you wanted to step on my line.
Sorry about that.
Dirk, what am I going to do with you, Dirk?
So 1.3%. So basically
1.5% increase. Yes.
So basically a little faster than cost of living.
Than cost of living. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, $93,000 a year is not.
No, it's not.
Not too bad. Not too shabby. And now 2017 marked the 31st year that ASQ conducted this salary survey of its members. And as usual, the report contains some really interesting little details. And first and foremost, the one that I picked out and that was picked out in the story was, despite the occasional, sometimes more than occasional arguments that one hears about the efficacy of Six Sigma as an actual improvement methodology, there's no question at all that training for your belt is a pretty good move for your career as an individual. Consider that quality professionals in the U.S. who have completed at least one level of Six Sigma training make an average of nearly $18,000 a year more annually. $18,000 a year more annually.
Kind of goes without saying, doesn't it?
Not a Six Sigma black belt here. $18,000 more than those without. So for those that have the most extensive training in this realm, master black belts, they earn an average of more than $142,000 a year, according to the survey, which is not too bad. That's an average, not a median. It's an average.
That means somebody's making like $200,000.
There's a lot of people that are making a lot of money out there with master black belts. Now, the ASQ salary survey was completed by more than 5,800 quality professionals, pretty good data set, and they were within a wide variety of sectors, and more than 95% of those that responded were regular full-time employees, but there were also those that were self-employed or retired, there were part-time workers, or people that were just unemployed as well, who were part of the pool of respondents. So for more information, you can visit online at www.asq.org. Always good information on that salary survey. I didn't mean to bring you down, Dirk, but well, get your master black belt, dude. Come on.
Get my master black belt.
Do it.
Yeah, I'll just do that in my spare time.
There you go.
All right. Okay. The concept of risk-based thinking has been implicit implicit, I should say, in previous editions of ISO 9001 through things like requirements planning, review, and improvement. But ISO 9001 2015, the new version of the standard, now actually requires company to use risk-based thinking to manage their business. And as basic as this may seem, the idea of looking at all processes with an idea toward, quotes, what are the risks, is still a topic that confuses a lot of people in all of the webinars that we do. And we get questions like, do I have to look at risk as it involves my whatever process, so people aren't sure why. Yeah, I need to look at risk here, but do I need to look at it over there? Big question that comes up all the time. Also, which stakeholders do I need to consider when I look at risk? So yeah, obviously maybe my immediate customer, but what about this guy over here? Do I have to concern? So there's still a lot of questions about it, or actually even what do you mean by risk? Some people still aren't even sure what the term means within the context of an organization. Right. So even though we've been talking about this for quite a while, there's still a lot of questions about it. Well, with us today via Skype to answer a few of those questions about risk is Richard Harpster, president of Harpco Systems, which specializes in providing software training and consulting for risk-based product lifecycle management. Hi, Rich.
How you doing?
All right. Well, hopefully you can shed a little light for us on risk this morning. We have been talking about on this show and in previous webinars about risk-based thinking for a long time, but 2-3 years or more. Mm-hmm. Do you think that people still don't get the concept?
I would say they're struggling with it, and one of the reasons they're struggling with it is there's so many stories out there about what it is. One of the questions I'll answer quickly is your definition of risk. It's actually very simple. Basically, whenever an objectionable incident occurs, you're exposed to harm. So the definition of risk is the probability of that incident occurring in combination with the severity of harm that you're going to see. So when you have a process, anytime you produce, say, an out-of-spec condition, that would be an objectionable incident. So you have to try to determine what is the probability it's going to happen, what is the harm that people are going to experience. So basically you can set its risk level. Now in a company, there's all kinds of sources of risk and you have very limited resources to go after them. So you use this technique called risk-based thinking to determine where to spend your resources. As simple as that definition is, I've been to conferences, actually gave seminars on how to implement risk-based thinking. And when I attend different sessions, I'm confused when I walk out. So it's really quite simple to implement. The other good news is that I don't know of any companies right now that aren't implementing some form of risk-based thinking. As an example, if somebody comes to you with new business and you sit down and you try to decide whether or not you should take it before you take it, that is a form of risk-based thinking. And finally, what I'd like to say is that you should not implement risk-based thinking just because the standard requires it. You should implement it because if you truly implement it correctly, it's going to save you a lot of money.
And Rich, Dirk alluded to this in our intro to you. I mean, we've done a lot of webinars on this topic on risk-based thinking. We're doing one with you this week coming up. On Wednesday, the 17th. So inevitably, when we do these webinars, somebody always asks, well, do I have to analyze the risk of this or that, depending on my unique situation? So the question is really, there's maybe confusion as to what processes or departments that someone really has to consider when they look at risk-based thinking. Is that correct?
Well, ISO actually is non-prescriptive in terms of being very detailed of what it is they want you to do. There's basically 3 areas they want you to focus on. One is like opportunities, like I just discussed, and that is an opportunity for new business. They don't want you bringing in business that you're not capable of handling. The other opportunity is your processes. Now, what the standard requires is that you sit down and you define what processes make up your quality management system. And whatever those processes are, and again, the standard is non-prescriptive, you can make it whatever you want to be, They expect you then to basically go through those processes and apply risk-based thinking, which basically says you go through the process, you say, how can it fail? That failure is an objectionable incident. What is the risk? And then is that risk acceptable to me? The third area they want you to use it in is a thing called plan, do, check, act. Now, without risk-based thinking, you sit down, you have a problem, you develop a plan, you do it, you check to see if it worked, and you implement if it does work. Well, any difference with risk-based thinking is you plan, but before you do a risk assessment on it. So you would take the information from, let's say it was a manufacturing issue and you use process FEMAs and as your risk tool, you do your plan and you basically would look at your process FEMAs to see if they tell you anything about that risk, or you could actually do a little mini process FEMA on the process change you're intending to do. So basically, instead of plan, do, check, act, it becomes plan, assess risk, and then only if the risk is okay do you check, do you act.
And once you've done all this and you're going to either get a surveillance audit, or you're going to go for ISO 9001 2015 for the first time, an auditor comes in, what kind of proof are they looking for that you're actually doing this thing called risk-based thinking? I mean, what kind of documentation or whatever proves that, oh yeah, I'm doing this?
That's pretty interesting. To me, the standard is like the Wild West. I mean, the good news about this standard is it's non-prescriptive. The bad news about the standard is it's non-prescriptive. So the bottom line is the standard even says they do not require you to have a formalized risk management system. It doesn't have to be documented. Now, I sit back and I say, how does one implement something that's not formalized, that's not documented? Yeah, the good news about it is in the standard, it also says if you want to go further than we recommend, you can go further. So the bottom line is you don't have to show them a risk management procedure and how you do it. However, you do have to show them evidence. And as far as the evidence you would have to show, I would go back to the definition of risk. The bottom line is you have risk because you have an objectionable incident. So you better have documentation of an incident. And then when you have that risk, you got to have a harm. And so you better have documentation of what you think the harm is. You also have to have documentation of how probable the incident is. And then you have to identify, well, what exactly do you think was the root cause of the incident? And what did you do to make it go away? And then finally, you have to assess the impact either on the severity of harm or the probability of the incident. So you have to have some documentation that this is how we evaluated the check, and then this is how either we reduced the probability or we reduced the harm, or we flat out decided if maybe you're in a design stage that, hey, we shouldn't be in this business, we're not going to do it. So I think if you have those basically 6 elements, objectionable incident, probability of the incident, the harm, your root causes, what you did to make it go away, and the results of your efforts, you've met the requirements of proving you're implementing risk-based thinking.
And Rich, this applies, you mentioned things that have already happened, but I mean, you would also have to assess potential risks, right? So maybe you haven't had something happen, but this is potentially something that could happen down the line?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the main core principle of risk-based thinking is preventative. It's like a lot of people, one big mistake when they do design FEMAs or process FEMAs, they see them as like almost like a fault tree. Okay, what you want to do is you want to try to anticipate all the sources of potential risk and put controls in. On the design side, the risk occurs because you release a design spec that when manufacturing builds it to spec, the product's not going to work. Okay, like, anybody who's in a manufacturing process, we used to have a term, I was the plant manager at Form, we called it a mystery defect. Well, it's a problem that occurs, you spend a lot of effort trying to solve it, and it mysteriously disappears before you do. Well, a lot of those issues are design issues, they're not even manufacturing. So if we can catch that issue before we release the spec, we stop that problem. And similarly on the process side, when you do a process FEMA, you want to analyze not only the current causes of defects, but we teach basically you want to do a very structured decomposition so you can identify all the sources and hopefully prevent issues before they happen. Like in the plant that I managed, after 9 months of implementing risk-based thinking on a process, we reduced reject and rework by 40%. We cut our maintenance delays by 40%. So it's, like I said in the beginning, don't do risk-based thinking because the new ISO standard tells you to. Do risk-based thinking because there's a lot of money in it.
All right. Well, we could talk about this a lot more, and well, fortunately, we'll be able to next week. Because if you're interested in learning more about this topic, we, Quality Digest and Harpco Systems, are presenting the webinar 10 Things You Need to Know When Implementing ISO 9001:2015 Compliant Risk-Based Thinking. That's going to be on Wednesday, January 17th, next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and 11 a.m. Pacific. Rich Harpster here will be your presenter, and I'll be your host. So keep an eye on in your email inbox for an invitation to the register. Also, there's a link underneath the player page down there that you can click that'll take you out to the registration page, and you can sign up for that. Rich, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to the webinar.
That's right. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you on Wednesday. Thanks, Rich.
Take it easy. Bye.
Okay. Yeah, have a good weekend. Yeah, going to be a good webinar. Yep. As you can see, I think you got a good taste there for Rich's expertise in FMEA. So you're going to get a good deep dive on that on Wednesday, so sign up for that one. All right. Now, the question is, how will autonomous vehicles interpret hand signals? How will that happen, Dirk?
They're really smart. They're just smart.
Well, there was an article that we ran that asked that very question: how will autonomous vehicles interpret hand signals? And it was written by Abdesalam Saoudi, and it appeared in Thursday's 5th issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. That's our Thursday roundup that we do of the best stuff that we had. Initially appeared on the Conversation blog, which is an excellent blog, earlier this month. Now, Saoudi is a sociolinguist at the University of Pittsburgh. So as such, he's uniquely well equipped to tackle this particular subject, Dirk, which really involves the so-called language, I guess you can use air quotes on that, the language of driving and how driverless cars may or may not be able to interpret and adapt to the variety of ways that human beings communicate with and through their vehicles. You know, people have a lot of communication styles when they drive, right? I mean, there's various things that they do that kind of give cues or clues to those that are driving, sharing the road with them. So,
especially if you're from New Jersey, right?
If you're from Jersey,
you have all sorts of hand signals.
As Saoudi said, if you're from Pittsburgh as well. Well, in this piece, Saoudi covers just a few of the many ways that we discussed in which human drivers communicate with one another. I mean, think about it. When they're driving, people do things like they honk their horns, right? You said it, Dirk. They wave their hands, they flash their lights, they slam on their brakes, they speed up, they slow down. It's all a form of communication as well as transportation, right? If you think about it, they're communicating something to those people that are sharing the road with them. There's also things like signs that adorn cars that provide some context. And no, I don't mean bumper stickers such as "dog is my co-pilot." I mean things like "baby on board," right? Or "this vehicle makes frequent stops." Saoudi references both those signs. I mean, those are messages that plant an idea in your mind that could prove to be really important as you're following said sign bearer on the highway, hopefully at a safe distance and a safe rate of speed.
Some other bumper stickers that say things too.
that you might want to stay
Back
even
off
further
a
off
little bit,
from. But then you have to also consider, as Saudi did in this piece, the social and the cultural spins that come into play depending on where you're at. I mean, in some countries, maybe you honk your horn constantly, right? I haven't driven in those countries, fortunately, but I have, now to think about it. But I mean, some countries, you hear honking all the time as you're driving around. In other countries, it's kind of a warning that you're going to hit me or you did hit me or whatever. Get out of the way. Sounds like an acknowledgement versus, using your horn to say, hey, back off. And now, after thinking about all these very human actions and reactions and interactions, most of which we do without much of any preconception, you might want to ask yourself one question. how will we program autonomous vehicles to respond to any and all those things? And I know you're going to say something there, but wait till the end. I'm getting there. And toward the end of his piece, Saudi talks about something that he studies every day, and I'm certain, and that's sociolinguistic cues. And this goes way beyond mere words. These are things that most human beings just learn to interpret as we grow up. I mean, that can be like the flutter of an eyelid, or like a throbbing temple, or maybe the flat tenor of an inauthentic laugh, right? Like that one right there. Yeah, there you go. We pick up on those things, and they mean something to most of us, not all of us, but most of us, in a generally kind of agreed upon way. And that helps us share information with one another without actually having to say it. You may say, I'm fascinated by what you're saying.
Rolling your eyes at the same time.
Now, if you know what that means, you will change the subject, hopefully. And it's one of the many things that makes the human brain the most amazing technology on the planet, if you think about it. Now, we're going to get into this, Dirk, because I know you have some strong opinions. I think programming machines to interpret information anywhere near the speed and sophistication of the human brain is a long, long way off, and I think it's quite frankly going to be impossible. But many smart people, like Dirk over here, believe that this is nothing more than a series of really complex engineering problems that can be analyzed and worked out. And the day is coming when these problems are going to be overcome. So I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a lot of limits on what machine intelligence can actually do. I know that it's an engineering issue that's programmable. But I think that day where it's really going to be very smoothly integrated is a long, long way off.
But see, and this is the thing that I think a lot of people and not just Saudi, but other people, where they kind of are missing part of what's going on right now with the autonomous vehicle versus human interaction is the fail-safe part of it. It doesn't have to be smooth. It just has to be safe.
Right.
And that's it. So in a lot of the examples he talked about there, does a car know how to react? No, but it's not going to hurt somebody because it knows you're not supposed to run over a person. You're not supposed to run into a car. You're not supposed to run into a barrier. If I don't know what to do, I don't do anything.
I know, but put it this way: if the autonomous vehicle doesn't know what to do, and over a 100-mile trip averages 15 miles an hour, nobody's going to want to use it because of all these fail-safes that are built into it.
Well, that part I agree with you. So that part I agree with you. But it seemed to me he was coming at this from a safety point of view, and I'm going from a safety point of view. I don't think there is an issue from what you just said. There's so many fail-safes. Oh, I don't know what to do. I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. I'm going to stop. Then yeah, it could be pretty frustrating.
Yeah.
But at least it works. And then over time, as they begin to interpret various things, or as there's more autonomous vehicles, and you don't have to worry about the human jerk because everybody's autonomous, that will change as well. Or as the roads get smarter, your infrastructure communicates with the car and so forth. I think you're right. I think the fail-safe is going to cause problems in the short term, but they're already doing in cities, they're already doing driverless Ubers. I think they're Ubers.
He talked about it.
I think that's what he was talking about, was a driverless Uber cab.
Yeah, he made what...
And actually what that cab did worked perfect.
Right.
He turned in front of the cab. It didn't plow into him.
Right.
It went, oh, this guy's turning in front of me, and he shouldn't be. So stop. Problem solved.
Well, but he also
moves across and the cab goes.
He also mentioned that the human passenger in that cab seemed to be pretty frustrated.
But that's the thing, is the car doesn't care.
But the human passenger will.
Yeah, so his eyes get really big or something.
Well, but what if it takes you twice as long to get where you got to go? If you got a meeting with a
As a
client.
price of progress.
I don't know. I don't know, Dirk. I think that it's an open question.
They're going to kick you kicking and screaming into your autonomous vehicle. I can
Well,
tell.
I actually have an off script that is
right.
somewhat analogous to this. We have just a couple minutes here before we close the show. So okay, so CES just ended.
Right.
Or is
Computer
ending today,
electronic
I think.
show.
Yeah,
Yep.
computer electronic show and
Power
in
went out
Vegas.
right in the middle
Yes,
of it.
I know. I know.
All that technology doesn't work without electricity.
That's an amazing thing. That's very true. Okay, so there was a lot of stuff that happened at CES this week, as always does. There's a lot of cool stuff. I mean, I heard a story on NPR. Where a bunch of self-driving luggage going around the halls. There was what I thought was a really cool little innovation where they have basically airbags that you can use as a belt for an elderly person. So if you're falling, literally in milliseconds, the thing expands and protects your hips from breaking.
So
I think that's a great idea.
You're standing looking over the Grand Canyon,
That won't help.
You and your wife. No, and it accidentally goes off. Poof. Oh.
Well, then you'll just
Sorry, dear.
float down. You'll get down there before the burrows. So there's a lot of cool stuff that happens at CES, things like that. So my question to you is, things like CES are splashy, they're customer facing, and all those things. But we know that not everything that's at the show at CES, although it's changing now from crowdsourcing and everything, but we know that things that are at CES are often kind of aspirational, and that they don't necessarily come to maturity in the way that you expect. So do you think that a show like CES really is more about marketing and PR, or is it really an opportunity to knock up against some R&D issues and improve the technology as the technology?
Well, I think it's both. And we see this not just at CES, but we see it at the shows at IMTS too. Is you'll have stuff there that is very marketing driven. Hey, here's our new part. There's those that are testing the market. Here's this cool idea, augmented reality or virtual reality to run some sort of measurement equipment, right? That's come up in several different shows we've been to. It's not a product yet. You ask them, is this a product? No, we're just trying to see if there's interest in it. So CES is the same thing, is we're going to put out this cool idea. We know we can do it. Is anybody interested in it? And also it is a way, with thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people going past your product and playing with it and toying with it, how does it last? And what are the interactions? And when you start seeing somebody interacting with your product and they're doing something with it that it was never intended to do and you didn't think about, well, again, that's now you got product feedback. So I think any kind of trade show, and CES probably in particular, there's all of those things going on.
Because there's geeks that are there, and they're very smart, and they're going to use it in ways that maybe you won't have access to. When they buy it, they're going to use it in ways you don't have access to. But right there at CES,
right in your booth, you're going to say, "Oh, you did that."
Yeah,
you weren't supposed to do
that. Like, wow, that's really cool that you did that.
Yeah. Or not so cool you did that.
Yeah,
we didn't know that was going to happen.
But you don't discount the marketing, the hype aspect of this too.
No, it's total marketing hype. Yeah. I think most trade shows are 50%, 75% marketing and hype. It's kind of their way to get the new products out there in front of an audience that is paid to go to that show. You've got what do you call it?
Focus groups. Essentially,
when your audience has already been filtered for you.
Oh pre-filtered.
There's a better term now. We'll go with pre-filtered. So you've got an audience that's already paid to go to this show, and paid a hotel and all that to go see this show. They're already who you're trying to reach, obviously.
Yeah.
And now you're putting your product right in front of them at a booth. That's pure marketing right there.
Yeah, exactly. Good stuff, Dirk. All right, well, thanks. You'll get me next week on our off-script segment. You'll come up with a question for me, and I'll hopefully answer it as well as you just did. All right, well, that's our show for this week. We want to thank Rich Harpster of Harpco Systems for joining us again. Don't forget that Rich is going to be presenting a webinar with us, and Dirk's hosting it next week, titled 10 Things You Need to Know When Implementing ISO 9001 2015 Compliant Risk-Based Thinking. So mark your calendars now. The date is Wednesday, January 17th. You can see it right there at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. If you haven't registered yet, you still have your chance. You're going to get an email on this early next week. You can register. A bunch of you have done that already, so be sure you check it out. Rich is a very detail-oriented guy.
Knowledgeable.
Very knowledgeable. He's going to have some good perspective for you. So join that webinar. You guys all have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
So long.
Bye.